Christian Livingstone here again, and let's do that demo now. I have the motor on the trike. This is what we're doing here. This Cyclone mid-drive motor mount. It was the factory one was not very good, and what I came up with was these collars here, and we've talked about it earlier. So I still had those obstacles about, you know, where to mount this, because this tube is in the way up here, and if you mounted it here, it would just be a big obstruction. So, you know, I thought about modifying this and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, this kit comes with this worm drive hose clamp, this big old thing that wraps around the motor, and then they have a big old zip tie that, you know, it's a kind of a cheap way to keep this from wandering around on the axis. And undoubtedly, you know, people aren't going to like it. I really don't blame, you know, the Cyclone producers for doing that, because it does give people the ability to get up and running with these systems all the quicker. And you know, every application is different. There's so many bike designs out there. You know, doing that, you know, at least gets people up and running until they, you know, decide how they want to develop some other way of holding that in a fixed position. But I think what I'm going to do ultimately is, you know, I like collars. You see there's a collar holding a two-piece split collar there. I like using collars as mounting brackets and fitting hardware too. So I'm thinking, you know, this thing rotates on that axis because, you know, that's just the nature of how it's mounted in here. It's not fixed. And so I'm thinking I'll just put a couple of these big split collars. These tubes are 1.5 inch diameter. Now I'm simply going to form a reference point for lining up this motor and this chain line to it. You see, there's the sprocket, there's the outer sprocket. We're going to get them lined up. And the best reference point I think I can have, and I kind of already know where it is, but it's on one of these bolts. I'm simply going to mark a line, a half. That's where it's going to be referenced. Take those two together, and this can go wherever it wants, even around the curved area of the tube. You know, once it finds its spot, when you clamp it down, it won't move in conjunction with the other one. Here is that mount. These are those two collars we talked about, and here's the motor mounted up. It's just to this drive here, not out to the final drive yet, but I thought I'd show it actually rotating and functioning so that you know, people can start to take advantage of this as a solution for mounting these, because these are really brilliant systems, I believe. They're a little more, you know, brutish than some of the more refined systems like the Bafang HD. I think, you know, those are great, and who knows, I'll probably utilize one of those in the future. But for now, these babies are about half the price at $389 from Luna-Cycle. You know, you get the controller down here and, you know, the throttle and stuff. So it's a real good value, and it puts out crazy power. So, you know, if you're an enthusiast and maybe want to go for something that takes a little more creativity in mounting, absolutely. This is it's been a fun project for me so far. Okay, and that's what we're going for, that flat spot on top, beveled on each side to fit up with this this kind of tab right there. And as you can see, we'll get a nice good weld inside that crevice there. And you know, of course, on your grinding wheel and your flap disc, you know, the aluminum loads up on those, but no big deal. So, okay, Christian Livingstone here, and I've got those aluminum collars, and I'm getting ready to weld them up. But before I do that, I just want to show you, you know, how I've prepped them. You know, you can see I've left about a 1-inch flat spot for these little barrels to go on top of. These came right off the existing mount from the Cyclone motor, but we're not using it. We're just going to use this piece along with these collars. We're going to weld them together, and this will do it. But as you can see, they're flat on top. There's a little bevel on each side. I kind of beveled this a little bit too. I'm not a TIG welding expert, especially not the aluminum TIG welding. The green machine in the back is pretty new to me. Before that, I had a TIG machine that was DC only, and you know, if you know anything about TIG, you know DC does the mild and stainless steel, and the AC units, like that one there, newer, better, more expensive, will allow you to do aluminum, and that's what I wanted to do, and I almost overlooked aluminum as a possibility for this. I went ahead and ordered some collars of, you know, plain old steel, and my neighbor gave me a slab of this bar stock here. I was just going to fashion these little tabs out of this stuff here, just cut them and drill the holes just like this, but I thought, no, what? I got this little aluminum welder to weld aluminum. Why don't I see if I can find some collars that are inexpensive, and they are. They're not expensive. These were a little over 10 bucks a piece. The regular steel ones were $8, $8.50 or something like that. So the price is not much more for aluminum. And of course, aluminum's lighter. I like the unpainted brushed metal finish that aluminum and stainless give you. So that's another reason for wanting to do this. And honestly, this will be my first aluminum project, actually something functional produced, other than just practicing with beads and stuff like that. So so it's kind of exciting, and you know, we're going to get it squared away for this Cyclone mount, which really is kind of lacking in the way that it comes with the mounts. And again, I'll just mention, this is probably a good solution if your reference point on these motors, mine just happened to be right in the middle of where that tab would be, so that means I don't have to worry about anything. I just put it right in the center, weld it, and that's where I'm going to stick it. But I suppose if your particular bike frame is a little offset, you could come off center a little from the collar a bit, but I wouldn't go too much. If you've got if you're off center much, don't, you know, try to get out that far. You know, go ahead and get the steel and, you know, cut something that, you know, brings it up a little bit, and brings it up and diagonal, so you have something under it, you have something to slope back onto the collar, and that's really the best play for that. But we don't have to worry about that. We're gonna zip this baby up. I've tacked these babies up so you can see that whatever the alloy is of the collar and this tab barrel part here, they're weldable, and you know, they tack up pretty good. But I'm going to let it cool very carefully each bit. It's still warm just from these tacks, and this is a small part, so I recommend that you keep the lower portion of the collar bolted up to this baby, because, you know, if I put too much heat in this, this collar is going to want to shrink or distort in some way, and you know, if you have the other side mated to it, that way they'll shrink or distort together. You don't want those thread holes to lose their alignment. You want them to stay aligned. So, you know, whatever happens, you want them to do it together. Unit here isn't for me per se, but I will keep this as a demo and a staging platform for some of the stuff I do. But anyway, let me just show you quickly a little closer. Here's the controller it comes with, and the throttle, I opted for the thumb throttle, and I think standard it comes with a twist grip, but both of them have an on and off switch here with like a Christmas tree lighting system here that I don't like it so much, but yeah, that's what it is. I've got a 52 volt battery there, and they charge up to about 58 volts. So the controller's 40 volts, the battery's 58 volts, and that means this thing will put out well over 2,000 watts, which equates to 3 horsepower. This is about 3 horsepower with that. Now, this motor will put out more than that. It's advertised as the 3,000 watt Cyclone mid-drive, and you know, you can get that if you use a 72 volt battery with this controller. So, you know, there's room for a real thrill seeker here. I think I'm going to just stick with the 52 volt battery. That's going to be plenty. You know, these tires are only 24 inches, and you know, they're not going to get me the ultimate top speed. I'm guessing that even with these tires, this setup will give me 40 miles an hour. I believe I saw a review where there was one installed on a two-wheeler with the 26-inch wheels, and with his derailleur gear set, I think he got 45 miles an hour. So honestly, I'm not going for top speed, but I do want some punch. You know, if I'm going to put on a big old muscly motor like this, I do want it to, you know, look the part and act the part too, and undoubtedly this will. But for right now, we're just talking about this mount. And this should be the final weld, and yeah, it's going well. Some of that smoke might be paint from the underside of this table. I believe I painted some of the underside of this when I put the top on. But let's take a look. And there it is. Nothing to brag about, but I'm not ashamed of it either. The other one looks much the same, and it's a single pass, and that's what I was kind of hoping for, is to just get a good deal of metal over those babies, and so they'll be pretty stout, I think. But you know, I might just grind those smooth and make it look like you know, there was no weld there to begin with. But yeah, no, I'm liking it. These points I talk about, you know, may be no great revelation for a lot of the guys who fabricate the stuff, but if you haven't bought one of these, you don't know. And so I'll point them out, and then maybe that'll help you decide if you do want to go ahead. It'll just, you know, let you know what kind of issues you might be in for, and they're not hard to overcome. So anyway, we got the battery plugged in, we got the throttle here, and there is a button, and it's on, and I'll just and you can see that there's a freewheel here and a freewheel here. That's why, you know, the crank arms don't turn. But while you do pedal, the motor doesn't, you don't have any magnetic drag there, so that's a good thing. And it's external. This freewheeling action is external, so unlike a hub motor or even the Bafang mid-drives, which have their freewheeling action to prevent that magnetic drag, they have them internal. This one is external, and I like that. It's easier to fix and diagnose, and boom, there it is. Undoubtedly, it's not very costly, and all of this stuff is not costly on these controllers, these throttles, and all of this stuff. The parts are low cost, so that's a big plus. Okay, so here you have it. The finished product, like I said, brushed, metal finished, and this is what we were going for, I was going for, is for these two items here to replace the original bracket, which required an idler sprocket and this clamp to keep the motor from wandering on the radius of this bracket. And so none of that will be necessary. These will do away with those, and also give the ability to tighten the chain for us do-it-yourselfers. And not only that, I use two BMC hub motors on a trike. Just a quick clip of the two-wheel drive electric hand cycle. There's one of the hub motors, geared hub motors, planetary gear hub motors. The other one's over there, and one of them I've modified to be clutchless. When the clutch started failing, and I decided not to fix it and just make it clutchless to, you know, kind of sever that weak link. And it works fine. I dig it. In the headset there, that's a bottom bracket up top. You see a video camera that starts automatically, and it's a lot of fun. You know, whenever I'm riding, you know, it records everything in case somebody runs me over and kills me. They can look at that and say, oh yeah, you know, that guy did it. But anyway, these two rear drive hub motors, I've been using it for about a year now. It's winter right now, February, surprisingly warm, but you know, these two hub motors work really well in the snow and the mud. There's my you know, Christian anarchist plate. You know, I read the Bible, and I read between the lines, and I can see that you know, the message and the gospel of the kingdom of Christ is very anti-statist, and so, you know, I want nothing to do with the state and the extortion racket that it is. And so, you know, I don't have a social security number or driver's license or any of that stuff, and that's just what that's about. So yeah, quick clip of the electric hand cycle for a reference, and you know, it's a lot of fun. So this other trike will undoubtedly be fun too, no matter what I do with it. I think I'm just going to use it to as a staging platform for experimenting and, you know, letting people try it and having fun with it. The controller is quite good, and it's got a lot of jumpers for settings, and one of the settings it has on it is a soft start setting. And you know, I usually like real quick takeoffs, and even with the soft start on, it does give me those quick takeoffs, but I use it because it prevents, you know, that jump, that lurch. And you know, when you're rolling around crowded areas where there's people or in tight spaces, you don't want to hit the throttle and have it lunge and maybe spook somebody or, you know, bump into something. So I use it on the BMC controller because it really is helpful, and it doesn't really slow me down. I don't want to take off like a rocket, but it gives me quick takeoffs but prevents that lunge. Now, I was curious about that with this, because this is 40 amps and my BMCs are only 35 amps. And so I thought, well, you know, this controller doesn't have that, you know, soft start jumper feature, so what am I going to get out of this? And take a look. Take a look at how smooth that is. Even though this is only a quarter turn or less on the thumb throttle, the resolution is very smooth. You know, this baby will start at a crawl. So that's what you can expect, I think. And this is without a load on it, but undoubtedly it'll be the same or even better when there is a load to get those smooth takeoffs without the lurching. That's it. Full throttle. It doesn't look like much on the sprocket there, but we'll see how it equates to top speed and torque and all that. So a little addendum video that I'm going to do just for this one little segment that is really going to be a bigger part of a video and thread that I've started. And the video is on my YouTube channel, and it's called Cyclone Monster E-Trike Build. And you know, I'm interacting on a forum too for e-bikes, and I bought this Cyclone mid-drive motor, and I'm building up this trike. And it's not my first trike, but it's my first one with this mid-drive, and I'll show you the motor I have right here. And it won't really give you a sense of what the mid-drive is, but I just want to show this little piece because I've been waiting for these collars to arrive in the mail, and they did today. These are 1.5-inch bore split 2-piece collars, and this is what I'm going to use. 2 of these to replace what the motor mounting arrangement came with. It came with this, and it came with this idler sprocket, and we're going to be able to do away with all of that with not much more than these 2 items here, and a little bit of steel and a little bit of finessing. And so let me show you that motor while I got it open here. And the reason I had it open was, you know, I was waiting for those collars to arrive in the mail, so I decided to strip off the paint of this cover. And these covers and some of the other ones down below there look like pretty good quality cast aluminum, which is nice. And so, you know, I like a brushed metal finished anyway, and so, you know, aluminum gives that, and stainless steel gives that. So, you know, whenever I see cases like this, I'll try to get the paint off there because I like this finish better. And, you know, of course it doesn't chip off and scratch like paint does. So while I was doing that, you know, I took a look at the planetary gear arrangement. These are big, beefy gears, so to speak. And another interesting thing, while I was here, I noticed the outer ring that the gears roll around in is just, you know, pressed in with the pressure of the bolts going through here. And so, you know, this is where we're actually going to be mounting pretty much into here. And you can see the typical bracket that it came with. That's about 1 inch in between there. And I just want to point out, because this potentially could slip around if, you know, if I create too much raised tension up here when I, you know, make my little mounts. I just want to point out that we don't want to take the tension off this. This gets sandwiched in between here, and we're going to put something in between that, so we don't want to make the tolerance more than is helpful. We want. Anyway, here we are demonstrating the mount, which I think is going to be a great solution for people because Luna Cycle did get an order from Taiwan. These come from Taiwan, and he ordered 100 of them. And I think that's probably the biggest load or order, you know, to one supplier. So, you know, previously I don't think, you know, these were available as a kit to individuals from a source here in North America. So this is still kind of a new thing going on. Now, I understand that this particular motor is used in very high-end units because it's so robust. It's low cost, it's robust, and they use them in, you know, these $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, you know, off-road kamikaze type electric bikes, and that's a good thing. You know, we get them and they're cheap to us, and they're robust, and but they haven't been available to us. I mean, you know, these manufacturers of these high-end bikes, you know, they bought them as a you know, a manufacturer and a producer, but now these are available to us individuals without, you know, having to worry about directly purchasing them and, you know, clearing customs or anything. Lewis Cycle took the trouble to do that, so he got a boatload of them, sells the kit for $389, and it's a brilliant value. It looks like all the planets are in alignment as far as the controller and, you know, it being a smooth. And now I believe I've made my little contribution in passing this along that, you know, I came up with. But even though I may not leave this here, this is a trike, and I may put this underneath, and but at least for now I'm going to use this as a baseline, just so I know, you know, what to expect from these ratios and these sprocket sizes. I'm probably going to change the sprocket sizes and before I move it underneath. But let's move on to those finer points I was talking about in the installation. And one of the finer points, I believe, is these two sprockets right here. I happen to have that. One chain is a 1/8 chain, and those two sprockets are quite close together. And if you've got the 1/8 chain and you put the other one for your final drive, you know, they could clang and chafe on each other. So, you know, I'm thinking that maybe if you're going to stick with these same two sprockets, use the 3/32 chains instead of the 1/8, or put a washer, you know, at each point of these spacers here. In between these spacers, there's a spacer, and you could create a little more space in between those by putting washers there. So that's what occurred to me. And also the distance that you have the motor from the bottom bracket down here, you know, undoubtedly you'll want it as tight as possible, and this is as tight as possible I get with the crank arm, so it doesn't hit on the motor. It just barely clears that, and you see the offset begins right here, and it goes progressively up and then gets back parallel this way. So, you know, upwards and outwards is where the offset begins. So if you bring the motor down any, like I'm thinking about changing the sprocket size here, and maybe scooching this motor down a little bit, shortening the chain, I'll undoubtedly have to grind off some of the side, the inner side of this crank arm. But these are pretty stout, and there's plenty of metal here, so I wouldn't be afraid to grind off a 1/4 inch down in this area, if that's what I do, if I do try to scooch it down there. And what else? We talked about, you know, one of the main reasons for this mount was to get rid of that idler sprocket mechanism jammed right down in there. It's unnecessary now. You know, we can just move this up the tube, and that creates our chain tension. No need for an idler. And these collars, you can see, negotiate a turn in a tube pretty well. Not perfectly. Down there you can see I kind of reamed out the sides a little bit, but up top it's quite good. But on the turns where they ovalize and shrink on the other side, you know, it's not as elegant there, but who cares? It works. Oh, what else? Oh, like I mentioned earlier, this space, if you're using this piece off the old mounting hardware like I did, I was you know, careful not to add on any with the weld or anything. But then when I tightened this up, there was a little looseness there, so I added a washer. There is a washer behind right at that point, and down below as well. because there was a little gap and a little looseness if I didn't get it just right. So I put the washers in there, and that took out any doubt about it being perfectly snug from side to side there. It was hard to tell at first because this chain, I put it on so tight that, you know, this thing seemed locked solid. But when I took a closer look, I found that, yeah, that thing does. It calls for a washer in there. But, you know, if you're going to fabricate this out of mild steel and use steel collars, you know, you can make that with whatever you want. And, you know, if you do it just right, you won't need a washer. But throw in a washer there if it's not. So there you have it. The Cyclone mid-drive kits are something. They're quite something, and I'm having fun with this project, this trike. I'm not in a big hurry to finish it, but it's going well. I thought I'd pass along that little motor mount tip. And oh, there's one more thing. Let me show you. On this controller here, those phase wires, you notice how the colors are off? You know, the blue to blue, the yellow ideally would go to yellow, and the green would go to green. They don't on this. I was a little surprised by that. So if yours comes that way, don't be surprised. You know, you could try to turn them around like I did and just check and see if that was better. But no, it's not. Ignore the colors there. If it plugs in not matching the wire colors, no biggie. So I think that'll do it. The Cyclone mid-drive kit from Lunicycle is quite good, but it comes with this crazy mounting hardware that you know, they gotta give you something to begin with, because there's so many applications and so many adaptations that could happen. This will get you going, but it won't do it in a very elegant fashion, you know, fabrication-wise and design-wise. But I think the two collars are quite simple, and just about anybody can get it done. If they don't do a little bit of welding, maybe somebody in their neighborhood could. So watch this little video, show it to them, and just say, here, weld up this little thing for me, and you know, I won't bug you anymore. Okay, bye-bye.